This is the Turn Your Life Around podcast, and I'm the 180 lady. I've been helping people turn their lives around since 2007 as the founder and CEO of a large mental health company. The purpose of this podcast is to have meaningful conversations with old friends and new friends, everyday people just like you and me, about how they turn their lives around. We'll discuss all things mental health, fitness, finances, relationships, parenting, spirituality, you name it. My hope is that you can take something away that will encourage you today. I'm your host, Sarah Coates. Are you ready to turn your life around? Hello and welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have my longtime friend, Lisa Mastellar, here with us today. How are you?
I am doing fabulous. Thank you.
I'm going to do a little introduction of you for the audience.
Okay.
Lisa Mastellar is a daughter, sister, friend, wife, mother, and grandmother, owner and principal of a hospitality design firm, Sass & Co. Since 2011, she sang and did various work for miscellaneous projects, including Barbie, Toto, and Heart. And she has written for small design magazines. I'm so excited to have you on this podcast. You have such a great story. And you've had a lot of turning life around moments that I am excited for you to share. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
Okay, first of all, Sass & Co. That's a very cool name for a company. So I just want to hear more about how you came up with that name.
Yeah, so it's actually very personal. So we just rebranded this past year because it was Sassafras Studios. And everyone who was like, we want to go visit your site. And they were like, how do you spell sassafras? And I'm like, okay, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So what we did was we just shortened it. So to back up, I didn't know that I was going to be designing for my life. I was a musician most of my life. And so when I fell into it and the opportunity presented itself, I wanted a name that would represent something from my past. Mm-hmm. And so it actually spoke to my father, who had passed away of a brain tumor when I was 11. And he was an engineer. He worked on the space shuttle system. He was one of the first engineers that actually developed the fingerprint system. And then he was like a bee farmer and a firefighter. Like he was like a man's man, but he was also very quiet. But the one thing that we shared together was on the ranch that we grew up on was homemade root beer. And every once in a while, he would get his big black cauldron and get a thing of black ice, and I would just have to sit, away, didn't want to touch it. But we loved root beer, and one of the ingredients for root beer is called the sassafras root. And growing up, I couldn't pronounce L's, so I ended up it just kind of went into Sass. So my brother has all my life called me Sass, and I thought sassafras or Sass, that kind of just brings everything back to the root of where I started and who I love and who I want to honor. So
that is such a cool story. Well, as a business owner myself, I love hearing how people got into their line of work, into their career, into owning their own business. Yeah. So, you haven't been in design your whole life. So how did you fall into design?
It was crazy. It was so crazy. So I was homeschooling my kids, which is a crazy story in itself. And I was going to a church that you and I had attended together. And there was a time where I ended up doing some set design when set design wasn't really a thing at the time. It just had started. So prior to that, I had told them that I was doing window displays for malls in California prior to getting married. And so they remembered that and they said, why don't you do something like that for the stage?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'll give it a try. And that ended up being several years and growing a team, I'll volunteer. But it really helped kind of dictate how I understood color, scale, lighting, and I had a lot of fun. So after a long time, we decided to move away and lead worship at a biker church.
A biker church. Vroom, vroom.
Yes. And which was, all the wild stories of
Wait, what is a biker church?
Well, yes, that's the question, right? There were people at the church that we had attended, and they had felt a draw to open up a church that was just for bikers.
Oh, okay.
And so they had asked us, well, we need musicians and you guys lead worship. So it's a natural fit. And we were like, no, it's not a natural fit. I do not have tattoo.
Are you a biker?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm nothing even close to a biker.
Yeah.
But we ended up praying about it and we told them no. And then we actually walked downtown Raleigh right before they were going to start. And it happened to be Biker Week.
Oh.
And for whatever reason, God just really, and I take this very seriously because I hate using phrases like this, but it was true that God really impressed on our hearts and we couldn't shake the feeling that we are supposed to go and try it. And like what doesn't fit is actually God's, handiwork. He actually uses something that you don't think is going to work and makes it perfectly fit. So we decided to give it a try. So we had left the church, went to go with them for a couple of years. And in the meantime, I got a call back from the pastor's wife. And she goes, hey, we're going to be doing a Starbucks and a bookstore. We've hired a guy from Las Vegas, and he's coming out. We've already seen his work. We really like what he's done, but we want a couple tweaks. And because you've been working as our set designer and doing events, you kind of know us a little bit more than he does. Would you be willing to sit in on that meeting? Silence. Because I'm like, well, I'm not a designer.
Oh, right.
I've done set design, but I'm not I can't.
Yeah.
I don't feel adequate or valid to step into that role. And she's like, well, just come. So I just promised myself that I wouldn't speak and I would just nod and I'd just be as polite as can be. But the grace was, his name was Barney Paradise. He was so lovely. He was able to read the room pretty quickly and understood and had seen some of my work prior to what I had done there. And he pulled me aside and he's like, here's the thing. I'm going to shadow you. I'm going to teach you how to be a designer in real time. And we're going to get samples for you, and you're going to be in charge of doing the cafe. Are you ready? And I was so humbled and blown away by his grace because he didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
And I ended up working my butt off and trying the best I could. We opened the doors. There were several people. I remember there was one picture. This was all before iPhones. So I remember having one picture of, 50 people. And there's like 2 inches of my forehead in the back. And that was my, here we go. That was my grand opening. But I had a few people, one from the Trump Tower who had just flown in saying, this Starbucks spanks the one there. So you're doing something good. And I think you need to think about doing this from now on.
Wow.
And then another guy had come up to me and shook my hand and leaned in close and said, did you do this? And I remember my heart was just just beating so fast. I was so uncomfortable that day. And I said, yes, I did it. And he's like, this is beautiful. You need to be doing this from now on. And when he walked away, someone had told me that he was the CEO of Chick-fil-A.
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of maybe with all the doubts and insecurities I've had that have just really rode my heart and mind very strong in my life. Could I listen to that possibility? And so within a year later, I got my first call to actually do a design build in Goldsboro from the floor up and be on a project for 2.5 years and learn under the GC.
Oh, wow.
And so I just have been brought into these situations and kind of what I would say is that, it says bracing for impact, but I think I've been braving for impact, is just trying to be brave in the face of fear, in the face of complete vulnerability, and thinking that little voice that says you can do it, to see if it's right, to see if, you do have more than what you give yourself credit for. And so, now this many years later, word of mouth, I'm like, no, I'm a good designer. I couldn't say that a couple years back.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to get there. I know I'm now spilling into other things, but there's my answer.
No, I love it. I love it. Do you ever feel like a sense of imposter syndrome?
Completely. And just when I got therapy about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, after my birth family had found me, she immediately said, you are imposter syndrome all over. And I'm like, what's that?
Yeah. Can you tell I'm a therapist? Because that's what I asked you about it.
Yes, exactly. Bing, bing, bing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and she started to describe it to me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's me. But I grew up in the '80s where Oprah started talking about abuse, and it just seemed like the '90s where everyone was abused, like everybody, it was on their tongue. And so I felt really cautious, like I don't want to just throw myself into something that isn't true. I don't want to just claim something that maybe it's not, So I've always been really careful of those taglines or those
Right.
headings that can describe definitely who I was, but wasn't sure I just
Yeah.
wanted to be careful.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway.
Do you feel like, or through therapy, what has helped you overcome or challenge the imposter syndrome?
Very much. I just think probably the biggest power that therapy has had in my life, and to be very honest with you, I haven't had enough. I'm still a mess, but I believe what it's given me is, one, the ability to be able to be myself and have someone have the shoulders for me. I'm a very deep well, and I can dive deep, but then I come up for air. So it's not like I stay down there. But I think it's just there's been so many hard things I've had to hold as a child that I thought I had to also hold as an adult. And I'm just relearning and giving validation that, yes, that was then, but you don't have to, you can put that down now. And so I
Right.
think therapy actually gave me the license to be able to recognize that you can put that down. You don't have to pick up shame every day. You can leave it down. You don't have to wear it anymore. So, and it's fragmental steps of getting healing. It's not going to be a huge change,
Yeah.
but enough to make me raise my head and go, I can now be healthier for someone else if they need validation.
Yeah, that's so good.
So,
Yeah, therapy is certainly a process. It is
yeah,
not like instant healing, instant
yeah,
turnaround. It's a process.
yeah. And you have to be willing to show up and do that really hard work
I
that
know
just
it's hard.
turns your gut inside out. But
So is starting a business, though,
that's
and
very true.
maintaining a business. That's hard
Yes.
work.
Yes.
Yeah. So, so the story you were sharing about the design build and the CEO of Chick-fil-A,
Yeah.
whispering to you, that kind of thing. Would you say that was your turning? Was that a pivotal point for you? Was that a turning life around moment for you?
I would say it was a click, but definitely. I mean, it took me 2 years of still going.
Yeah.
I don't think I can do it.
Yeah.
I don't think I can. I came from. My background was I auditioned to get into a preparatory school that my brothers, who I love to death, they are God's gift to me. They were a little older than me. They went to school, and they were very smart. They knew how to carry the one. I didn't know what to do with the one. But they said, well, our sister's really nice, and she can sing like an angel, so maybe she can get in that way, and just date tutors the rest of her life. And so pretty much I did. I was tutored. I was held back once, almost twice, and so what had happened in school was based off of my father's passing. My mother had remarried a month later, and there was another cosmic shift in the universe for me to be able to hold that as well, where everybody else was starting to leave the roof where we lived. I had to stay, and so there was a lot of hard times there. So between always having a hard time with school and didn't know I was dyslexic till after I was kicked out
Oh, wow.
2 months before I was going to graduate. Yeah, I was called down to the office, and they said, I thought I just needed to get a gallon of milk for my mom, because, you can't text because, again,
Yeah.
this was before iPhone. So
Yeah.
I was just totally like skipping down, like, oh, I get a little break, and I sat down, and he's like, this is your last day here. Collect your books.
2 months before high school graduation? Oh, my word.
And it wasn't character, because I was actually pulled in quite often by faculty. They were like, can you go talk to so-and-so?
Yeah.
So I was a good girl on campus that just her GPA couldn't, it was a preparatory Christian college. So it wasn't probably favored that I had such a low one. And so then I guess all to say is to peel back that time is that all my life I have had to really sit and get up after crying myself to tears, thinking that I'm going to fail and that the only thing I can do, and I'm not to downplay babysitting, but that was the only thing that I could make money from. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't go to college because I don't have the wherewithal or the capacity.
Yeah.
And yet here I stand, being able to just, perseverance can go far.
Oh, yeah. Builds character.
Yeah. Yeah. So all to say is that, that whisper from the CEO of Chick-fil-A, that was laying on top of a whole life of doubt and insecurity and not trusting my own voice. I mean, for a long time, if I said that light over there is pink, it's obviously pink, but someone said, not really, it's red. And I'll go, you could talk me into going, it's red, just because I would probably go, yeah, you're right. It's probably not pink, even though I think it's pink. So, I had a lot of work to do,
right?
So, and fortunately, my husband has been such a cheerleader for me to really sit with a lot of the things that I went through as a kid and the untaping of all the things that I've believed in until recent. So
what did you do after they kicked you out of the school? What did you do? Did you graduate from somewhere else, or what happened?
No, they had promised that if I was to get a GED, that if I came back with proof that they would offer me my diploma.
Oh, wow.
That didn't happen. So I did get a job right away, and I worked to get my GED. I had to take it twice. And I remember celebrating with a bran muffin at Carl's Jr. after the fact. I mean, that was like, wah, wah.
A bran muffin.
But, because we're healthy. But I did that. And later that summer, when I got my GED, I was with my grandmother, who I loved. She's like a tall Betty White, very independent. And she and my mom had gotten a cake and a gown and told me to just, go to the bathroom, change, and walk down the hall. And that was my graduation. It was very, very sad.
Very nondescript.
So sad.
Aww.
And then, years later after I married, here I homeschool my kids, But yeah, I decided to try to get a job. And I was singing and doing voiceover work. I did some commercials and stuff like that. So I was thinking I'll just go that direction,
right?
And I ended up marrying a musician, and I really thought that was where I belonged, So I just kind of leaned into that lane.
Yeah, yeah. So you married a musician.
Yep.
How did you all meet?
We met New Year's Eve night. I was doing window displays at the mall, and I was such a geek. I brought the Bible to read while I was eating a salad, and such a geek. Good thing it wasn't like the family Bible that's huge. Big one. Yeah. But I was reading it, and someone tapped on me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I love that book." And I looked up, and it was just really great guy who was just like had a lot of hypertension, and he's like, "Man, you should come to our New Year's Eve party. My wife and I would love to have you, and we've got a lot of great friends who are musicians." And so we started talking. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll try that. I was new and fresh out of the home, and I was living with my brother. And so I thought I'd give it a try. And I remember it was the 80s, so it was very much Paula Abdul.
Yes.
Where I had leather pants, which I still need today, and I had suede knee-high boots, a smoking jacket from a vintage store, a vest, a tie, and the biggest hair a person could see. And I walked in like, hello.
Yeah.
And I guess he noticed me, but that was the night where I was there was that moment where, you hear at times where time stands still.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure, I can never flirt with anyone. I was just one of those, I'm like, no one will find me attractive, so I will just make friends with everyone. So I thought, he was definitely taken. And by the end of the night, he had tried to get a hold of me through the friend who had tapped me on the shoulder and invited me to his party. And eventually he asked me out. So
Nice.
and then we got married right away. He was in Germany on the road for several months, and then we planned our wedding and got married. So I was freshly 21. So we're almost on 35 years.
Oh,
this
congratulations.
October. So
yeah, that's pretty phenomenal.
yeah.
So that was a turning life around moment for sure.
Yes. Just slightly.
So, okay. So then continue to walk us through your story. What happened after that? I know you've had multiple turning life around moments.
Yeah. Goodness gracious. Let's see. Well, I would say probably the freshest one would be the birth family finding me during COVID. And then even just slightly prior to that was battling breast cancer.
Yeah.
And so which one do you want me to pick?
Yeah. Oh, they're both intense. They're both powerful. Well, let's talk about the COVID time frame.
Okay. Yes. So I had a project at Myrtle Beach, and I got a call from one of the brothers that had found me a long time ago. And I had put in my information on adoption.com of all places, and it had nothing to do with someone trying to find me. But in California, when I was born, at the time that I was born, all adoption were considered closed case adoptions, and you wouldn't be able to really get your true birth certificate. You'd have to require it after 18. So when I decided to homeschool my children, and that's a miracle, I needed to have proof that I had some sort of GED and that I belonged in the U.S. So I put my stuff out there just to be able to get that paperwork across. So in the meantime, while I had forgotten all about that, my brother had found me and said, I think we're related. So he came out, him and his wife, he's 6'5". He's huge.
Yeah.
And the most beautiful man. And we definitely, we walked the same. Our gait was the same. It was the first time I was able to experience as an adult. I now have a piece of the puzzle. All my life, I've always felt I was just so weird looking, so unique, so always the odd person, the Jeff Goldblum in the room, which now I kind of think is cool, but just never quite fit in, And now I have a little bit more to put together. So while I was in Myrtle Beach, he called me and said, Lisa, if you have time, I need you for a few minutes, and I need you to sit down. And I'm like, well, let me go get some coffee, and I'll tell him I'll be right back. So he proceeded to tell me that all our brothers had reached out to him and said that our family is very much alive, even our mother's alive, and I didn't know that. And they want to meet us, and there's 1,000, I'm like, literally 1,000 cousins in Hawaii that want to meet you. So I was like, okay, all right, this is awesome, and I don't know how to process this. So right before I left to go back after I was done with my project, I right before I jumped in the car, he had quickly sent me a picture of what was my mom and my sisters, and what was which was so freaky was I looked just like my mom.
Wow.
And I threw down the phone, and I remember trying to pick it back up, just shaking, and I was like, I've got a 2-hour drive home, and Kurt, you've got to hold me, because I just saw my mom for the first time, and I don't know what to do with that.
Wow.
I don't, it's like when you're adopted, even though you're celebrated, and I was definitely celebrated, but there is always this question of why and where do I belong? It's so deep. And I've now found that was a gift, but it was a really hard story. I mean, to honor the family, I would almost have to share details off the microphone just to be kind to the people who are living. But it is filled with tragedy and addiction, and a lot of grace and perseverance. So to fast forward to a year and a half ago, we decided, let's go stay for a week as siblings. And the mother came along, but she stayed somewhere else because it was like that. Siblings, we have something in common. We don't know. I don't even know how to process the mom because I don't know you. You're a stranger, and I want to be kind to you, but I don't know. I just don't know my feelings right now. And so everybody treated it. We were all adults. I was the youngest of 8.
Oh, wow.
So my other father that I've not met yet, he's got 8 too. So I grew up in a family of 14 eventually. So there is, I did the counting on the airplane just to try to carry the one, 34 siblings.
Whoa.
So we're probably all related.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So
you went out to Hawaii,
we went out to Hawaii with my husband because we had a new project in California.
Okay.
And we're like, we'll just take a plane.
We'll hop over to Hawaii.
We'll just go to
we're out
Hawaii.
there.
I've always wanted to go Hawaii. And so we went over there, and it was the most beautiful week we've ever had. A lot of closure, a lot of late nights crying together, asking questions. How did you feel? Because we all have a different story, because each of us was from a different father.
Right.
But definitely we were all very tender and supportive, and they were all married. And we've all only had one partner in our life, which is interesting coming from, the story that we had. And then meeting my mom, she was very kind, very, very, there's definitely a different language to Hawaii that I had no clue.
Yeah.
So anyway, all to say is that I now have a place where I'm embracing. I've got new brothers. And I think the hardest challenge was the brothers that I've had all my life. And the mother that I have right now, who's kind of going through dementia, and how to explain and share that with her right now is a sensitive place because it's like we've only known each other. Like, yes, I was told I was adopted, and yes, I was, but we really have started at the beginning all together, So to have this other family embrace me right away, I was just trying to hold both.
Hold two things.
Yeah. So anyway, just a lot of stretching.
Yeah.
A lot of stretching going on.
My goodness.
Like yoga for the heart.
Were you adopted from birth, or how old were you when you were adopted?
I was 2 months old.
Yeah.
So she warded me to the Children's Home Society right away. And I was there for 2 months. And so, I was very fortunate because my mom and dad who adopted me, we had a revolving door on many needed children and families in and out. A lot of wild and weird stories. Wasn't sure they were all the greatest to have under our roof, but they had a heart for people.
Yeah.
And I understood that there were many cousins and sisters and that had started their life so much more horrible than I ever did. I didn't know the capacity at which a lot of people that I've known, their life has started. So I feel like in knowing my mother's story and how fortunate I was to be held off from the deep tragedy that could have followed, I wouldn't have been sitting here today to be the healthy version that I am. I would have been a whole different person.
Wow. That's a lot of siblings, 34. That's
yes, and I say that knowing that I'm really close to like 3.
Yeah.
But if you were to write down people that actually I would be called their sister, it's 34.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And so when were you diagnosed with breast cancer?
I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 42. Yeah. So I'm 55. And so I've got just until April where I stopped treatment, and God's given me all this time so far. I tell you what, it's been a lot of pain and agony to walk away because it's now a whole different body and a whole reality that people on the outset don't think about, but I do, because
Right.
I don't get these back. These are now gone. So I've had to sit with that. But outside, well, with that, God has been so great to give me so many opportunities to really just lean in and say, you know, until my body gives up again, I want to live life.
Yeah.
I want to say yes to more things than not, you know, so I have.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. So, do you mind talking a little bit about your breast cancer experience?
Sure.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
think that's something that a lot of people have personal or,
Yeah.
one person removed
Oh, I
kind
know.
of
I mean, who doesn't now?
experience. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's crazy.
How did you find out?
Um, I had a lump, and I my husband said that, you know, he was playing doctor. So he's like, yeah, you might want to go get checked
Oh my
out.
goodness.
Is this X-rated right now?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
PG-13. No.
Yeah. But we're married.
True.
So I decided, I was a bit fear prone, but, you know, to be very honest with, how do I choose my words carefully? I was a Hawaiian person, which
Yeah.
means that I was a full-bodied person.
Okay.
So I was bountiful.
Yeah.
And so when you have cycles, you know, there's things that just you never feel quite right most of the time. There's always, you know, knots and stuff. So I pretty much ignored a lot of it most of my life because it was normal to feel
Right.
that. So I just thought another one, and it's probably nothing. But when I went into the doctor, Susan Catchings, she right away, she pretty much turned like a sheet. She was just like, yeah, we need to get you seen.
Really?
We need to get you in right away.
Wow.
And that was sickening to hear, because I could read her face. And so, as like I do all tragedies, I joked my way through my little mammogram, and you know, they had to do a little clip and take a biopsy. And we were talking about what restaurant do we like, you know. And they all kind of turned a different tone, and they said, we'll be right back. We have to pull in the guy who reads the x-rays. And right then when he came in, he's like, we have done so many of these, 99%, 9%, I can't say it, 100% sure that we know that this is breast cancer.
Wow.
And right away, I remember getting up and smiling and going, okay. And I remember when I opened the door, they told me to go ahead and why don't you bring your husband back? And my whole family was in the waiting room. And this old lady, I mean, why would this happen now? Old lady was just taking her time with the walker, trying to get to the front door. And I was like, well, let me hope, you know, it just felt like slow motion. And so I was trying to open the door for her. You know, her walker got stuck, so I was trying to help her. I'm like, no, it's fine. All I want to do is just get to my husband. So as she leaves, I kindly go, come on, come on. And he thinks everything's fine because I'm acting as everything's fine. And the doctor says, we believe that she has cancer. And so we're going to need to get you into treatment right away. So we'll be in touch with you, and go ahead and pay, and we'll call you. And the whole payment was him stuck. He didn't know how to pay. Like, it took him 9 times to try to use the card.
Who was stuck?
My husband. Like, everything just went deaf, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, I think you do it this way, honey. So I was already feeling like what I was as a child when my father died or when my mom got remarried. It was assuming I will be strong for everyone else in the room.
Wow.
And then we all got in the car. We were all quiet, and we went to Sonic, the drive-thru.
Yeah.
And we got drunk on fried food in silence. And that's how that day went. And then they called you and started just shoveling you in. Most of the treatment was very kind people who are very humane, and there were a couple that just were awful in the way that they treated someone with this type of news. But the biggest thing, Sarah, that I could say is, I would say that based off of the gift that my God had given me by seeing my father pass away of a brain tumor, when I was 11. He lived well and he died well. And I remember it was 2 days before Thanksgiving, and I remember his voice. He was in a hospital bed. And I was just walking up because they had waken us up to come say goodbye. And he had just said, please tell Lisa that I love her. And as I walked, he closed his eyes and a tear fell down and he died.
Mm.
And I remember the dog whining and looking up. I remember the song that he had played all night was Hold On My Child, Joy Comes in the Morning, Weeping Only Lasts for a Night. And so it was incredibly shocking. You know, how does a child process the death of a father and seeing that happen?
Mm-hmm.
And very godly. There was something that was just so profound in that moment that I had him as an example to gear into when I was diagnosed, knowing that there's no promise. Now he didn't suffer thinking that he would pass, but he was prepared. And so it was now my turn. I knew what it was like to watch as a child, a parent to die of cancer. And now I get to know from my father's perspective. And so trying to hold both the reality of being a definite human being and that how incredibly sucky this is to be in this place. Because you don't raise your hand and say, I don't want it.
Yeah.
Never. And you don't, I think I'm more afraid of the treatment than I was cancer because it's the treatment that makes you go through all the things. But God was gracious. I learned a little bit more of how to use my voice by when I was really wiped out during treatment. My sister-in-law was a cancer survivor. Hers was even a more radical story than mine, but she said, if you have no words and no strength, she sent me a monkey and an elephant, a stuffed animal.
Yeah.
And she goes, the monkey's going to represent that you are more than willing to accept visitors. But if you pick up the elephant, that means that you need to deter them and have them just drop off things and someone else will. But that way you don't have to say anything. You just hold it and your family knows.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of a different way to learn, but I did that. People were coming from all different places. It was both a crazy, beautiful thing, and it does delve into, there are a lot of people out there that got a lot of opinions of why you have it spiritually. And so
Why you have cancer?
So some people would go into those dark areas and say, you've got unconfessed sin and, you don't have enough faith to get healed. So there's a lot of church trauma from that. I'm like, well, if I followed the Lord after the Lord took my dad, and I think then I've got a lot of faith. So I don't need your faith.
Yeah.
God,
I don't need your unsolicited advice.
yeah. But it's a wild thing. It's like things not to say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Things to be really careful about. Even if you feel that you're true, be careful how you approach people because you don't know the story that they've had prior. So, yeah.
One of my favorite, not favorite, most annoying statements that I think Christians or religious people share is God will not give you more than you can handle. I'm like, I don't think that's exactly what the Bible says.
Thank you. Because I think it's the opposite.
I think it's exactly the opposite.
It's why you cry out to him, Let me tell you something, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
That does bring me to one of the biggest moments that I had. So it was my last surgery. So I had 5 surgeries and 5 chemo treatments. So it was all just kind of a year of that. And I remember everyone was out of the house. The kids were out of the house. I think my husband ran to go get something at the grocery store. And I remember waking up upstairs and the room was the quietest it's ever been. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel strength. I didn't feel love. I didn't hear God. All the things that you would think at that moment in your lowest, you should have more than any time was nothing. And I remember sitting there praying a very honest prayer. And I said, what the hell do you want me to do with my life? I don't know what to do. I really do not know how to get out of this bed. I can't design anymore. I'm pretty sure that that's done. Maybe I can be a barista someday because I do need to make a better cup of coffee. And I said, God, please, you're going to have to help me out of this bed. I really, really don't. And then I'm like, why? I can't feel you. I can't hear you. Where are you? And I remember just talking out loud to him, saying, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust that you love me, that your love hasn't gone away, that you love me now than you did before I had cancer. That just because I can't feel you or see you, I'm going to trust that you are still here. And I feel like that was a turning point for me. And within 24 hours, those God stories, got 3 emails. Hey, we want to hire you for our next design. Would you want to come in? And one of them was a YMCA in Morrisville, $28 million project. They had hired a design firm called Visionary Studios, and these guys had really great a list of accolades as far as their design work. They've worked. They all came from like Disneyland. Yeah. So coming from Southern California and having that in my backyard was like, oh my gosh, this is huge. So I remember saying, I look a little different than when you saw me last, and I'm just I want to warn you that I'm bald. I don't have any eyebrows. I'm a little weak, but they said, well, we'll take you anyway. If you want to come down and meet everyone, it's yours to lose. So I remember telling myself, don't you dare open your mouth. Just shake your head and see if it's something that you can do. And by the end, when I got back in the car, everybody was so kind. And I had just I felt like the blueprints were like 50 pounds. It was just huge. But, on my way home, I was crying because it was like, that was my birthday. That was my birthday.
Wow.
And that project, though hard, got me back into life and doing what I do. Yeah. And getting strong again and making decisions for people. And I loved it. And so to me, when you feel like you're at the end, I think the best thing that you could ever do is just be straight honest up with God and just, you can be human. It's fine. Yeah. He knows it. Right. And let him take care of you, and he read such a great story. All these twists and turns are just crazy pants. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and it's your unique story.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. It sounds like you just, in that moment, just completely surrendered.
Yeah. I didn't have anything else to give.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's definitely a turning life around moment. It sounds like. Yeah. That's phenomenal. So what are some projects you're working on right now?
We are doing, we just did My Carolina set. And so they've asked me to be on their show for about 6 months as a design correspondent for, their show. Through affiliation with ICID. So I'm now an ambassador, which just means that we're linking arms with designers from really much across the globe to be able to kind of emphasize local talent and kind of push them in. Because, it's kind of like being a musician. There's not a lot of people that will be known like Joanne Gaines. We'll probably never get to that level, right? But we might have the same level of talent, and no one knows. And so we want to be able to promote and kind of baton opportunities for the next designer. So right now, I'm in the hot seat. I get to be that one that's being showcased for whatever reason, but I'm having fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's one thing that we're doing. And then I've got a project in California. And then we have a possibility of doing a hotel, and that's really my heartbeat is boutique spaces. We've done restaurants and stuff like that. So any one-offs, and we get nitty-gritty. We want to do the logo, the menu, the sense in the room. I mean, we want to go to town. We want to
Right.
do the whole thing and really set up a business owner right. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
So fun. It
it
sounds
is a
like
lot
it's
of
so
fun.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
What piece of advice would you give to somebody who is feeling imposter syndrome or afraid of just stepping into the next thing?
yeah. Well, it's going to be very, I think, elementary, but I think there's a lot of power. I think for someone like me, because I didn't know how to use my voice or trust my voice, is I think the best practice is to just start by speaking what's really on your heart, what really frustrates you, what makes you mad, what is unfair. Um, Speak it out loud, and hopefully find someone who's safe for you that can shoulder and be a cheerleader for you. You know, I've only since having cancer really leaned into, for as many siblings as I had, I never really trusted women, to be honest with you, because my sisters, you know, we were all put in a weird situation. So it
Yeah.
wasn't a easy thing.
Right.
And I've had to learn as an adult to, you know, I love people, but that was one thing that I had a problem with was I didn't want drama. And I think we seem to allude to that very easily. And I thought, well, at some point, I just wish I was known beyond my husband. And one girl in particular that we play music with really showed up. She's hilarious, Dolly. If you're listening, you know it's you.
Dolly, are you out there?
Yeah. She's the one who, you know, brought chicken biscuits when I was in chemo and we used them as buck teeth, you know, just putting humor back in a hard place. But someone like her, who I've allowed over time to start trusting that, you know, I can lead with vulnerability, but there's a part where I can't go. And I've gone there with her. And I have found that she is trustworthy. And so I feel like if you have someone to start that, if you don't have anyone, and I know abuse, verbal, emotional abuse is a hard thing. And I know, you know, writing diary sounds like, you know, the easy go-to, but it is the beginning. It is the beginning of just trying to be able to get your own thoughts, all those twisted feelings down into paper, even if they're just for your eyes only. It starts the process of trying to kick up that dust and trying to make sense of a lot. And I think that's a really healthy habit. It's something that has given me a lot of energy and solace in places that I didn't know the power of doing something like that
Right.
does for you. So, so I would say it's something as simple as that, you know,
Yeah.
do it and do it now.
Do it now. Life is short, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, you had mentioned some podcasts that you actually really enjoy.
Yes.
Share those.
Okay. So during COVID, I would have to say that sounds fun with any F downs. I'm going to scrub that up. Was a lifesaver just because I think for me, when everything shut down, so did churches and so did just connecting with people, but it kept the connectivity alive. And so to me, podcasts became a very powerful tool. And there's some that I steered away from. I was like, yeah, I just don't get that. But I really leaned into that because it gave me an overall temperature of people that were following the Lord on a very real human level every day that sounded and acted and looked like me too, you know? So I thought that there was a lot of things to take away from that. And then a new one that I found that I am such a fan of is Kate Bowler's Everything Happens podcast. And she's right in our backyard. But the way that this girl is able to express very human things, the beautiful and the sad and the hard all at once, is really giving some fresh language and some very real, raw language. And so somehow beautiful hope, you know? And then there is a book that I just recently picked up that I think is very helpful, and it's new in my mind, is The 7 Primal Questions. And it's very much like the Enneagram, where it discusses how most of us hold a question as a child and we bring it into our childhood or into our adulthood.
Right.
So for me, you take a little quiz. They got a QR code. It's a very quick quiz, you know. And mine popped up as, "Am I wanted?" Duh, you know. And
Wonder where that stems from.
I don't know. So, am I wanted? And then what he does is kind of explain that the question that you hold as a child is the actual question that you answer for everyone that you come in contact with as an adult.
Wow.
So what you think is the frailty ends up being your superpower. So you're answering that for everyone else. And what do? I love the underdog in the room.
Right, right.
I love including them. I want them to feel seen and heard and validated. I don't care what background.
Yeah.
You are a human being who has a heart.
Yeah.
And that is precious. And so for me, that's how I've been viewing this world all along.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Helping others feel wanted because you didn't feel that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That sounds like a really great book.
Yes.
I'm going to have to pick that up.
Yes.
Mental note.
Yes.
Well, any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience about, your experience and what you've learned in your pivotal? I mean, there's been multiple points in your life and your journey of how life turned around.
Yeah.
Any final piece of advice for the listeners?
Goodness gracious. I would just say that it is tempting as a girl, the imposter syndrome, comparing ourselves. My story shouldn't be repeated for anyone else's life, and neither should yours. We all have a story, and I think that our suffering matters. I think that you don't want to neglect the pain. I think what it can be, if you let it, is a teacher to actually giving you purpose and turning you around. And I don't want to say that lightly. I say that with great intention. That there is power in no matter how hard your life has started or is now, there is always hope. And I don't know what that looks like for you, but I want to validate it,
Yeah.
So
that's really, really good. Thank you for sharing. And thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure.
Thank you to the audience for listening, and we hope you have a great one.